In this video, you're gonna find out what happens when the Fantastic Four's Invisible Woman takes on a new villainous identity. This is the entire story of Malice. Who is Malice? We all know it by now. 3 guys and a girl hopped on a ship, went to space, got bombarded by cosmic rays, and eventually got superpowers that turned them into some of Marvel's most important heroes. Particularly, the girl that went on the fateful trip to space was Sue Storm, aka the Fantastic Four's Invisible Woman. She gained the power to turn herself and others invisible and project psionic force fields. Given the skill set, it's no wonder that Sue became one of Marvel's most formidable superheroes, but that's just barely scratching the surface on the quote-unquote Marvel's first mom. Apart from becoming an integral part of Marvel's superhero lineup, the Invisible Woman has been portrayed as a wonderfully complex character. She's a mother, a life partner to Reed Richards, and an absolute icon in popular culture. But if you thought that Sue had just been Mr. Fantastic's foil in more than half a century of her existence, you would have another thing coming. Case in point, Malice. Now, the Malice name had been around Marvel Comics for quite some time. In fact, numerous characters have used the title. They include the Malice from the Black Panther series, the Marauder who became a foil to the X-Men, and that weird magician guy that Ghost Rider fought at some point. Unlike, say, DC Comics' Flash or even Marvel's very own Spider-Man name, the name Malice is by no means a legacy title in the Marvel Universe. That is to say, nearly each and every Malice had popped up over the years within the House of Ideas books had nothing to do with one another. But you'd be surprised to find out that one character who took on this codename also happens to be one of Earth 616's most clear-cut do-gooders, the Invisible Woman, aka Sue Storm. In a nutshell, the Invisible Woman version of Malice is Sue Storm's very own dark side made manifest. You can think of Sue becoming Malice like it was Jean Grey turning into the Hellfire Club's Black Queen. In other words, it's an evil and admittedly sultry version of the character, but Malice's smoking hot costume aside, the whole Malice identity is actually rooted in arguably one of Marvel's most heartbreaking backdrops. Here's the thing, for the most part, Sue Storm had been portrayed as an ideal mother within the Marvel Universe ever since she tied the knot with Reed Richards and started a family with him and the rest of the Fantastic Four. We usually see her in the modern era as the ideal maternal figure to her kids Franklin and Valeria Richards, the kind of woman who holds herself with a certain air of nurturance, quiet dignity, and strength. But turn the clock back a few decades or so and you'll find out that Sue Storm's road to becoming Marvel's model mom wasn't as smooth as you thought it might be. From model mom to Malice, the Invisible Woman's transformation into the powerful threat known as Malice all starts with the C-list supervillain Psycho Man. If you didn't know it already, Psycho Man is best described as a mad genius, and popularity aside, superheroes like She-Hulk have expressed the opinion that Psycho Man might very well be considered a cosmic level threat. As far as his origins go, Psycho Man hails from a diminutive place aptly called the Microverse. Aside from being an evil alien scientist, he was also the ruler of a number of systems within his microversal domain. Eventually, Psycho Man had to tackle the problem of overpopulation in his little empire, so he came up with the solution of conquering Earth and turning it into one of his colonies to spread out his subjects. From there, Psycho Man went on to be a constant thorn in Earth 616's side, especially the Fantastic Four. But as superhero stories usually go, Psycho Man got his butt handed to him every time he tried to take over the world with his zany schemes. But then, there came a time when Psycho Man got close to tearing Marvel's first family apart. In fact, this was as close to an undeniable W that Psycho Man ever had, and it all involved a dastardly invention called the Hate Monger. The long and short of it is that Psycho Man is a mad genius who has a thing for knickknacks and doodads that manipulate people's emotions. Hate Monger happens to be one of these things. Specifically, it's an android designed to rile up people and amplify their most savage and darkest thoughts. After building this evil robot in its native microverse, Psycho Man gave it the cheeky alter ego HM. Hate Monger then arrived in the middle of New York City and promptly started fulfilling its purpose, seeding hate and discord among its citizens. Hate Monger first incited riots on the streets, mainly playing on the citizens' biases and preconceived stigmas. But that wasn't enough for Psycho Man. To this mad scientist, dunking on the city that never sleeps is not enough. He had to get some good old-fashioned revenge on his enemies too. So Psycho Man sent the Hate Monger to the Baxter Building, home of the Fantastic Four. There, the pesky robot took on the form of Reed Richards and infiltrated the super team. Sue would not know any better when she saw Hate Monger impersonating her hubby. This proved to be the nexus point that turned the Invisible Woman into the supervillain known as Malice, as Hate Monger did its thing and unleashed all the hate and darkness in Sue when they met. Now you might think that it's a little hard to believe that a stand-up hero like Susan Storm would fall so easily for the hate monger's emotion-based abilities. But here's the thing, Sue was having a rough go of it prior to its evil android's arrival. You see, the Invisible Woman was far from the top of her game during this fateful encounter. That's because she's dealing with the aftermath of an unfortunate miscarriage recently before Psycho Man and the hate monger found her. Sue was physically alright at the time, but her mental and emotional state took a number from losing her and Reed's child. So, with just a bit of prodding from hate monger, the Invisible Woman's psyche was easily unraveled. After this, Sue traded her trademark blue and white FF suit for some black leather and thigh-high boots. She then renamed herself Malice, the embodiment of Sue's unbridled rage. If you're wondering about her powers, well, Malice and vanilla Sue Storm are pretty much one and the same, so their abilities are basically the same thing. That is, except for the fact that Malice uses Sue's innate abilities in a more lethal and unrestricted manner. Think of it as the Force from Star Wars. Jedi's use it to use tricks and lift rocks off swamps, where the Sith use it for much cooler purposes like choking out people or gaining unlimited power. In any case, Sue fell under the control of Psycho Man after turning into Malice, so the mad scientist sent her to wreak havoc all over the city, but his true purpose was to take care of the rest of the Fantastic Four, and given that he was on a roll, Psycho Man decided to sick Malice on the remaining members of Sue's team. A fight ensued between the two parties where Sue's Malice persona showed us and the other FF members just how powerful she can truly be when she takes the gloves off. However, Reed Richards, being the nerd that he was, managed to suss out the fact that Sue was being manipulated. Now, Reed deduced that the best way to have Sue snap out of this was to verbally, physically, and emotionally assault his wife in order to allow Sue's original persona to overcome Malice. I don't know how he came to that conclusion, but the gambit worked out just fine. Because of Reed's bonkers plan, Sue was able to reclaim her body from the Malice persona, but that's not where our story ends. Just because she was freed from Psycho Man's influence doesn't mean that Sue had forgotten what just happened to her. In fact, a perfect storm was brewing at the time, as Sue now had a target for all the rage and frustration buried deep inside her, Psycho Man. What we're trying to say here is that she wasn't done yet, because not long after breaking free from her Malice persona, Sue got to give Psycho Man his much needed comeuppance. It didn't take long before she and the Fantastic Four found themselves in Psycho Man's native domain, his microversal empire. There, Sue stole the evil genius's trademark control box, a weapon that bombards its target with negative emotions like hate, fear, and doubt. And believe us when we say that Sue went to town on Psycho Man when she got the control box, as she pointed it at the guy and started blasting him with it. This caused Psycho Man's central nervous system to be overloaded, which then caused his body to shut down and go into a coma. Still, a win's a win. With Psycho Man defeated, Sue and the FF went back to their home, and everything was going back to normal. Well, as normal as you could get after an interdimensional madman tried to turn you into his angry lackey, that is. Sure, the Malice character might have only been around for a short time, but it actually spurred Sue Storm's whole character to evolve. That's because it was at this point in Marvel history when she finally graduated from being the sweet, innocent, and exceedingly naive invisible girl of the Silver Age to the Invisible Woman we know and love today. More specifically, Sue changed her codename to the Invisible Woman right after this debacle. In addition to that, the whole episode prompted Sue to up her game and acquire an even tighter grip on her powers, making her much more powerful than before. But most importantly though, Sue's initial brush with her dark side ultimately opened the doors for Marvel to portray her as a more complex character, one that's plagued with personal issues like low self-esteem, grief, trauma, and everything in between. The end of Malice. After some time, Sue would find herself dealing with the cosmic artifacts called the Infinity Gems. This encounter triggered the Malice persona to manifest inside her again and even try to take possession of the Soul Gem, but it would prove too much as the Soul Gem resisted and eventually spurned Malice. This then allowed Sue to take back control of her psyche. Eventually, it would be revealed that the cosmic entity known as the In-Betweener was pulling the strings during this particular adventure. Malice would next come into the spotlight during the Infinity War storyline. Here, Sue found herself coming face to face with Malice again, resulting in a tug of war between herself. A bit of a struggle ensued as the Malice persona and Sue's own mind fought from within her. Sue would come out on top, but she was well aware that something dark and evil still lived inside her. Malice would meet her seemingly permanent end after a while, and this happened at the hands of Sue's very own son, Franklin Richards. Now, we won't go into too much detail about Franklin here, but all you need to know is that he went into the future and became the superhero Psylord. As Psylord, Franklin would travel back to the present and use his powers on his mom to absorb absorb the Malice persona into his mind. He would then team up with Sue to defeat an alternate evil version of Reed Richards named the Dark Raider by transferring Malice into him. In the end, the Dark Raider was slain in the negative zone with the Malice persona still trapped in his mind. This, of course, presumably took out Malice, and it was the last time that we'll see her, well, at least for now.